In Chesapeake, Virginia, on July 6, 2000, Raquel Foley came to the home of her neighbors, Martin and Melissa O'Connell. One of Melissa's co-workers had called Raquel and asked her to check on Melissa, who hadn't come into work that morning and wasn't answering her phone. Still on the line, the co-worker asked Raquel to check a back door. It was unlocked. Melissa's car was in the garage.
Melissa! Melissa?
In the kitchen, it looked like a dinner was prepared, but not eaten.
Still here. No. Okay. Melissa?
Melissa was known for being on time every day and was 8 months into a difficult pregnancy.
All right. No, it's locked. Melissa?
The bedroom door was locked. Something was wrong.
Melissa!
On the advice of the coworker, Raquel dialed 911 and reported her concerns to Chesapeake Police. Chesapeake officers and EMTs responded immediately. Melissa had developed gestational diabetes during her pregnancy. If she had passed out in the bedroom, she could go into a diabetic coma, endangering herself and the baby. They had to get to her. Unlike the rest of the house, the bedroom was in disarray. Then they discovered a body, face down in the bathtub. The expectant mother was dead. It was too late to save the baby. Melissa had bruises on her body, and there was some blood on the tub. Officers radioed in the suspicious death. About that time, Melissa's husband, Martin O'Connell, pulled up to the house. He said Melissa's co-worker had called, saying something about an ambulance. An officer asked Martin to wait outside until detectives arrived to speak with him. Homicide detective Tom Downing was on duty that morning. With Downing was his partner, Detective Mike Toothman. It is standard procedure for homicide detectives to respond to any suspicious death.
Lieutenant, what we got?
An officer briefed them on what they knew so far. A dead body, signs of possible ransacking in the bedroom, an unlocked back door, and the woman's husband just informed of the death.
Martin O'Connell was sitting up against the front of the house, adjacent to the garage door, with his head down.
Martin told the detectives he had been trying to get in touch with Melissa that morning. He hadn't seen her since the night before. Martin said that the night before, he and Melissa began arguing.
No, what you meant is
At one point, he tried to quiet her by putting his hand up to her mouth.
What are you, crazy? You know what? Get out!
She was so angry, she bit him on the finger, hard.
Still finding her sex.
He said she kicked him out of the house, so he went driving around nearby Virginia Beach.
She bit me. I put my hand up and
He told Detective Toothman he tried to get back in touch with Melissa. According to Martin, after several hours, he came back home, hoping he and Melissa could work things out. But in the garage, he found some of his clothes, with a note from Melissa telling him not to come back that night. He switched cars and left.
I'm not really sure.
Martin told the detectives that he checked into a local hotel. Martin explained that after checking into the hotel, he went to a local bar and had a few drinks.
Okay, and I see that you've got some fresh...
He said outside the bar, he tripped and fell, cutting his arms. The detectives asked if they could document the injuries. Martin agreed, saying he would do anything to help. The detectives next talked with Raquel Foley, the neighbor who first entered the house, and Cheryl Ramsdell, Melissa's co-worker, to get more information about Melissa. The women believed Melissa and Martin had a strong relationship. They also said Melissa was very security conscious, almost paranoid, and always kept the house locked tight.
No physical, okay? All right, thank you very much.
Investigators hoped the crime scene would provide some answers. Before processing the scene, senior forensics technician Nick Pizzillo videotaped everything. It looked more like a ransacking than signs of a struggle. From the toilet, the technicians recovered a partially smoked cigarette. Around the tub, they found several broken candlesticks and a pair of shorts. Also near the tub were the first signs of blood for forensics technician Grover Davis. They collected samples for later study at the crime lab. To the investigators, it looked like a murder. Now they had to find out who would have wanted Melissa O'Connell and her unborn child dead. Evidence gathered in the bathroom where the body was found indicated murder. The investigators continued checking the rest of the house. Everything seemed normal. They confiscated the answering machine in case it held any clues. Investigators believed the ransacking was staged.
I was very concerned after leaving the crime scene because things just were quickly not adding up.
They needed more information. As promised, Martin O'Connell, the victim's husband, came to the police station that afternoon for another interview. Detectives were having a hard time eliminating him as a suspect. Family and friends had told police Melissa never allowed smoking in the house, so they believed the killer smoked the cigarette found in the toilet after the murder.
We found that Martin O'Connell was a smoker and that he did smoke that brand of cigarette.
He again went over his actions on the night in question.
The impression that I had was that he was very intent on giving us his alibi. I'll try to get some information.
But the detectives noticed that several times some small details of his story changed. They confronted him directly.
The interview had started to turn into an interrogation, and at that point, Martin basically shut down. He said he was tired, he wanted to go home. He agreed to meet with me the next morning and finish up the interview, and he also said that he would agree to a polygraph. What really concerned us was the fact that he had never asked how his wife had died. Never asked anything about where she was found. Didn't ask any questions about the baby.
Perhaps the autopsy would provide more clues. Dr. Leah Bush led the medical team. It was definitely a murder. Defensive injuries indicated Melissa fought back. They had to prove who killed the mother and unborn child. Detective Downing asked Dr. Bush about Martin O'Connell's bite mark. Martin said he was facing Melissa when he put his hand up to her face.
In your opinion?
As each new fact emerged, Martin O'Connell looked more suspicious. But investigators had no solid evidence against him or anyone else. Homicide detectives Mike Toothman and Tom Downing still did not even know exactly where Melissa had been murdered. They secured a search warrant for biological samples. The samples could be useful in later lab examinations. Investigators were trying to put together what really happened on the night Melissa died. Martin claimed Melissa bit his finger during an argument downstairs.
After his telling us that, of course, we had the living room luminoled and processed, and there was no evidence of any blood there.
Evidence technician Grover Davis began another search of the house, trying to determine where Melissa was attacked.
The second trip that we took to the house, we found minute pieces of what we thought were blood or particles of blood on the door, and it led all the way down to the floorboard and the rug of the closet. We didn't notice it at first because it was so minute, and the closet itself didn't appear to be touched.
It was a major discovery.
We ended up sawing out some of the wallboard in the closet area, the floor area itself, a piece of carpet from the floor, any area that we felt could contain any blood evidence or hair or any bodily fluids. We sent those items to the forensic lab.
Okay, good job.
Police hoped the findings would point them to Melissa's killer.
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
At the Eastern Laboratory of the Virginia Division of Forensic Science, DNA examiner B.J. Blankenship compared the DNA from the bloodstain evidence collected at the house to the known DNA profiles of Melissa and Martin O'Connell.
On the carpet, the original blood sample that I found matched Melissa's blood. I then went back later and found several other lighter blood stains that one of them matched Martin, and 3 others were a mixture of blood between Martin and Melissa. When they're mixed together, that means that they were present together at the time the blood was shed.
Then the examiner made another important discovery.
As I was examining the carpet from the closet, and as I looked down, I noticed something beside the blood stain that was red. So I picked it up with my forceps and looked under the microscope to see what it was, and lo and behold, it was a piece of skin. And you could even see the ridge detail on the skin.
The ridge detail meant the skin came from the bottom of a foot, a palm, or a finger.
I immediately called the police department to ask them if the defendant had any wounds, and he did in fact have a wound on his finger.
To Dr. Blankenship, it was clear that Martin O'Connell was lying to police and that he was there when his wife was killed. Investigators kept looking for more circumstantial evidence. Melissa's friends had said the couple seemed happy, excited about the baby.
We've got just a few questions we need to ask you. First of
But
all,
when detectives spoke to Martin's friends, they got a different story.
That's why I went.
what we had learned is that he really was not planning on being a family man. I mean, that was the furthest thing from his lifestyle.
Detectives also heard unsettling news. Martin had left town. Several friends believed he was now living with relatives in Florida. Martin left the state without submitting to the polygraph examination he promised detectives he would take. Because he had not been charged, leaving was not a crime. But it was certainly suspicious. The Chesapeake detectives contacted police in West Palm Beach, Florida, who agreed to set up surveillance at the condo of one of Martin's relatives. Soon they spotted the suspect. While West Palm Beach could not maintain 24-hour surveillance, they would do regular checks to try to keep an eye on him. In Virginia, detectives were still hoping to figure out the motive for the murder.
It seems that our friend Martin has had
Then, detectives received a call from a woman in San Diego, California, who said she had an affair with Martin while he was working in the area for a few months that year.
With her.
When she learned of Melissa's death, she told them she was compelled to call.
Yeah.
He told the young woman he wanted her to move to Florida so they could be together.
After you found out he was married,
So
did he tell you anything?
at that point, I think that we realized that we had the motive. And please give me a call if anything comes to mind.
It was time to bring in Martin O'Connell, if they could find him. After several weeks, Chesapeake police were ready to arrest Martin O'Connell for the murder of his pregnant wife. But the suspect had fled to Florida. He had been spotted at a relative's condo in West Palm Beach, but then disappeared. A West Palm Beach deputy tried a ruse to find him. He spoke to the relative about a property damage report Martin had filed with the condo association, saying he needed to talk to Martin about it. The relative said she did not know where Martin was, but would try to have him call. The next day, the deputy received a message from Martin O'Connell with a phone number. He called the number and told Martin he needed his signature on a form about the damage claim. Martin asked him to fax it, but the deputy insisted he needed the original signed.
Okay, Mr.
He had to
O'Connell,
have
what
an
was your
address.
I'll get that in the mail to you.
Reluctantly, Martin gave him the address in Clearwater, Florida. The deputy immediately called the Chesapeake detectives and gave them the address.
Okay, thank you very much.
They in turn called police in Clearwater and told them about the case and their arrest warrant. Clearwater PD agreed to attempt the arrest.
That's him.
Officers set up surveillance at the Clearwater address. It wasn't long before Martin O'Connell showed up and was safely taken into custody and extradited back to Virginia. Prosecutors and detectives worked together to bring this emotional case to trial. In June 2002, a jury agreed on what happened the night of Melissa O'Connell's death. Just weeks before the baby was due, the couple had an argument. In Melissa's walk-in closet, Martin attacked. When he tried to stifle her screams, she bit him, fighting for her life. But he was too strong. Martin O'Connell was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the time, Virginia law made it impossible to charge him with killing his unborn daughter, too. But because of this case, that has changed. The city of Chesapeake was shaken to the core by the brutal crime.